Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVMLP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com for more on Walter's music. Devine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM, and Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI in Taos. I really appreciate that. If you'd like to reach out to me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. You can always reach me, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to remind you we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops and find out more about a really dynamic writing community, imaginativestorm.com is a great place to start. We would love to have you connect with all of us. And there are a lot of us in this Imaginative Storm writing community today. I have one of the stalwart members of the community. His name is Stewart Mintzner. And every Saturday we have a gathering on Zoom at noon Eastern time. And Stewart's on that call. And Stewart's a terrific poet. He's a thoughtful fellow, has a lot of philosophical interpretations of life. And every time Stewart says something, we have 30 people on the call. Every time Stewart opens his mouth to say something, people just lean into it and listen. So I thought, gee, I'd love to have Stewart on Twice 5 Miles Radio. So Stewart, welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's good I will give a shout out for Imaginative Storm. Yes to that place.
Well, we do have a good time there, and I don't know you physically because we haven't been in the same room together, but we've been on many, many Zoom calls, and I've enjoyed everything that you've had to say. So I would like to ask you a few questions just as a way of getting to know you better. When you're on the call, you really generate some terrific verse in 10 minutes, and I can tell that you've been doing it a long time. So could you give me and the people listening a background into how you have become so committed to exploring the poetic sensibilities?
Sure. Well, I love the idea of language, of words, of coming alive again. And what is this mystery? And I've always written, and along the way, I gave myself permission along the way with prompts from people who said things like, dance with your inner moonlight, don't hide the madness, which was a huge permission slip for me to just cut loose and open. And part of the imaginative storm, when you put images up and just to let the mind go and go where it does. And I've always been interested in life, in mystery and suffering and my own relationship to it, and all the times I go unconscious myself and then come up for air and have a belief system and bust myself, and words are magical, right? And I love the idea of the possibility of song, the song of language, of poetry, of words, having a potential ripple effect out into the world, not only as self-expression, but maybe touching another person in a particular way, and God knows where that goes. But I like that idea, and any subject's fair game. I like that any subject's fair game. A shooter in Las Vegas, out of a window of a hotel, your own love affair, your own longings, the parts of your body that ache, that haven't had a chance to speak, and even make a poem out of looking at self-judgment. Getting out of the addiction to perfection.
You mentioned suffering as part of the galley of subjects you're interested in. Say more about how you work with suffering, and do you use the exploration of suffering as a way to move toward some kind of peace around what can never be solved in the world? Because suffering's always been with us.
Yeah, I think what you said, and also as a way of self-medicining, touching the suffering inside myself, the stuck places, the belief systems, and the stories I'm telling myself. And in the process of writing, I think this poet named David White says, if you can describe exactly the way that you're imprisoned, a door opens, and it opens. And so it's not only, or at least I have it be, that's not only my stuff, it's everybody's stuff when one encounters it.
So when you first got interested in poetic expression, were you young, teenager, adult? What moved you in that direction?
Well, I always kind of wrote, and then I guess more in my 30s, a little more in my 40s, and then the page was always a friend. It was the one person that I'll have the page be an alive thing. It's the one person you could tell everything to that welcomed it. I had to hide a lot of stuff growing up, who I was. I found that the page was a good friend, a beautiful friend, a page that would accept anything that you had to say about anything you wanted to. So suffering is a part of it. Desire, love, where has it gone? Who am I? What is this journey we're all on toward this great disappearance? That kind of stuff.
So how many things that you felt like you needed to hide when you were younger finally came out in the open and you didn't feel like you needed to hide them, or are you still discovering things that you want to bring to the light?
Oh, I still have a social face. It's still, the page is still a safe space, but of course, I still hide. But what interests me is the process of taking off armor. I see where I'm armored and looking at it, see what the stories are underneath that I haven't told, that need to be told, the ways I need to meet myself or meet life. Yeah.
I like that idea. I've always had a bit of trouble understanding quite how to do that. Maybe it's my public face, or maybe I'm too lazy or not that curious or something. I've never felt like I could get down into it like I've heard you do many times on the Saturday calls, and you do it very fast. So, how does one go about discovering that? Or is that just such a personal thing that you find your own way alone? Or how does it work?
I think you do. I think you find your friends or allies wherever you find them in whatever form. And for me, it's about where am I talking fluff? I've had a teacher or two, a friend or two that just encouraged me to take a look. And taking a look is an act of courage, but it's a necessary act. Who are we in this mystery? And a lot of times I'm writing fluff, or I'm judging the heck out of whatever I write, and I'm not in touch with it. But there are ways of giving yourself permission to accept what comes up and then dive into it and mine it. And you don't know what voices are going to come. That's the part of me that lets loose, gives myself permission whenever I do to go in and see what wants to come. And a lot of it's junk, and a lot of it is not for publication, but it's edited way down the line. But some of it is gold, and some of it is an alignment. It feels good to speak it.
How do you explore those ways? What are they? The ways you use, could other people use them, or is this something you've developed just for yourself?
So I think it's universal. I think you show up for yourself in exactly the way you do, when you do. Sometimes it's right. Sometimes you go off of an exercise and explore what comes up in your body. Meditation's helped. I worked in a mental health court a long time ago as a public defender. And a lot of times I'd see the freedom of the energies expressed there inside that by a lot of the people who were labeled as crazy or off. But a lot of times I saw them as not only amazed at what they had to say, but the freedom of their expression, the permission they gave themselves. And there's a big injunction in this society, sanction for showing up and speaking your mind. It's labeled free association, but a lot of that's what's encouraged. And I think I just read something about a girl in school who was chastised for bringing her poetry, and they were worried about it as a mental health crisis. But her father was there and showed up and said to the faculty, "Hey, if you don't want her to write poetry, don't lay off of her. You don't condemn her for that. It's not a mental health stuff. It's an invitation to sing." Or one idea is that you have an orchestra inside you, and to play all parts of that orchestra, whatever that means. I don't know how to translate that. To play, dress up as King Lear and take a ride out to the cliff and howl out something to the wind and never stop talking, talk like a preacher. You know that. Talk like a preacher and never stop, and you don't know what's going to stop. Do the exercises in Imaginative Storm that you present so beautifully, which are all about association and what's next, and surprise yourself. So, yeah, one goes at one's own pace with a lot of judgment, and how much can we come home and listen to ourselves, touch ourselves.
I know when I was originally starting to work with what I ended up calling Imaginative Storm, and I called it Imaginative Storm instead of a brainstorm because I was working with the students in the 8th grade, 9th grade, and I said, "Hey, do you want to do Imaginative Storm instead of brainstorm?" And they said, "Well, I like that idea." And we did it, and it was a variation on the magnetic refrigerator words, on the magnetic poetry on refrigerators. And the students took to it with great ease because they naturally sensed, as adults do, this circularity of flow that happens when you just let words come out and you associate. And people often will say, "Oh, he's just free associating," as if it's a negative. "Oh, it's just free association. It doesn't mean anything." But if association has to be anything other than free, then why bother?
Yeah, and plus you have an intuitive sense of rhythm, of what words need to be spoken next and how you want to sing them, what goes out. And yeah, yes to free association. I'm all for it. Don't hide the madness, whatever that looks like. F the critics, and edit way down the line. Edit way down the line.
I get a kick out of this idea of people quickly labeling somebody off or mad or crazy, or you pick the name that you get labeled. And, over the years, we've had thousands and thousands of names to label folks. And yet, genuine mental illness, where somebody's really suffering from some problem that's a mental problem where they are actually ill, it's not as common as we label it. I'm not discounting how many people struggle with mental illness because there's a lot of it, but I think a lot more people have been labeled mentally ill when they're not, because they're just free associating and having a bit of fun and romping in the tulips, so to speak.
Yeah, we all want to look good. Nobody, and no one wants, or I don't want, certainly, a dissonant energy around me, whatever's labeled as a crazy energy. But to lock it up and shoo it away is not a great solution, in my opinion. It's too reductionist. We're so many parts, so many people inside. I have it be. There were all these parts where this Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh says he's the sea pirate, and he's the person who saves the sea pirate, and he's the woman who gets thrown overboard. And there are just so many parts to us, I think. And not that you have to act them out, but I think it's interesting to get in touch with them and give them voice. Give voice to the orchestra inside you, the little tiny bell, the little violin part, the great violin, the great horn section. Yeah, yes to what sings you alive.
When you write your poetry, do you have a sense that you're generating poetry, or are you just generating whatever happens to happen and then it becomes poetry later?
Well, sometimes I'll show up with a theme, go with a theme and see where it takes me. What interests me is the juice. If it doesn't have juice, if it doesn't interest me, it's probably not going to interest anybody else. I have to resist being a good student, being a student, doing the exercise right, and listen to what wants to be birthed and see what comes up after that. And let people give criticism. Let everybody have a vote, but have your vote count 10 billion for yourself. Just collect the incoming in a little golden cup about 3 feet away from your body and see what you want to let in terms of critical stuff.
Say more about critical. And I don't mean criticism as I'm going to barb you with a criticism, but being critical around work, and how do you use that idea to further what you write?
Well, sometimes I hate what I write, and the next day I'll love it, and the next day I'll hate it, and the next day I won't. And it's all a process. I wish I could get to it. As they say, there's always this divine dissatisfaction. But what interests me is this whole idea of what is beauty. And you have a big vote in that. I always was kind of fascinated by the idea of what if the world ended right now and you were the only person alive, but there are all these works of art out there, poetry or whatever. Who's going to judge what's beautiful? You're the only person alive. Do you go back and read other people's opinions about what they voted on? For me, it was always about a vote of what brought me alive. I'm sure I don't mean that to denigrate other people's way of opening my eyes to see what I might need to see, which may open me up. But as a bottom line, it's what brings you alive. What's your vote on it? So I try to remember that. And the end of the David White poem called Sweet Darkness, you probably know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You must learn one thing: the world was made to be free in. Give up all other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn that anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. So that coming back home again and again.
Can you think of a time in your life when you thought of something as ugly, which is the opposite of beautiful, and then it became beautiful as you considered it?
All the time, every day. I love getting busted. I love my hardened little belief system walking down the street thinking something's ugly and life is effed up, and then walking around and get something will just open me, randomly open me, open my eyes, open my heart. So yeah, I've killed off millions of people by judgment, by belief, by not looking and by not seeing them, and things. And also on the other side of that, I've opened and seen beauty. I've melted, and everything looks beautiful. Everything was supportive, and I wanted to hang on to that place and make a religion out of it, and I couldn't hang on to it, and things shift.
So, what about the ordinary? I've been thinking about ordinary a lot lately. Ordinary being walking through Smith's grocery in Taos and looking at the chicken wings for sale, barbecue chicken wings, or sitting in the parking lot looking at a truck with lug nuts that have a bit of rust on them, and seeing the red contrasting with the blue of the hub or the wheel, and thinking, oh, that is just absolutely gorgeous. The ordinary things. Can you talk about ordinary and how you relate to that and what it means to you?
Well, I'll talk about what you just spoke. It was beautiful. You spoke what you labeled ordinary things of the world, the stuff of the world, and in hearing you speak it, I find it beautiful. So yes to that, yes to naming. I love the possibility of of deep diving into everything in the hardware store and then flying to wherever it takes you. The associations with that. Let it go where it goes.
I've also been thinking that what makes something ordinary, your eyes make something ordinary, my eyes make something ordinary. It may be there's nothing on earth that's ordinary. It may be absolutely astounding. And no matter what we look at and judge, we still are looking at divine miracles, even when we think they're the ugliest thing we've ever viewed.
Sing it, brother. Yes.
On that note, how about a few poems from you? I'd love to hear some of your work.
Okay, this poem came out of a frozen shoulder that I had, and I wanted the shoulder to speak. So it's called The Aching Shoulder Speaks. I've been an afterthought for years. He forced me to move the hand to erotic magazines. He made me turn steering wheels to hog the road, guide spoons filled with sugar to the mouth, and lift the arm to flip off people I didn't know and I probably would have liked. I carried pencil to paper, writing Madison, Wisconsin, X equals 17, none of the above, as he cheated on tests. I punched pillows in bioenergetic exercises to expunge his anger at his mother, people in general, and the unfairness of it all. God, it was pathetic. But what about me, the poor obedient servant who always performed like a field hand, like a Roman legionnaire doing his sworn duty? Well, I've had enough of lifting that arm to websites feeding his loneliness. He should have come to me who has loved him in darkness for years. I would have told him, stop, come home now, I know your heart. I'd whisper with the clavicle, the pelvic cradle, the breastbone, the ulna of the ways back to song. I'd tell him he belongs with us in meadows, by streams. I'd lift that arm to the sky, move it through the water, let all of us breathe there, easy, talking again.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
How did that poem change you when you wrote it?
It was sweet giving the shoulder a voice. And it was sweet going back into the things that I had copped out on myself in various ways, fallen off the wagon, and having that shoulder be a witness, a kind of a witness to life, and somehow that associate whatever the pain was in my shoulder, letting it speak all that stuff. It was good. It was like medicine for me.
And your shoulder was aching for what reason?
It was one of those frozen shoulders.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know about frozen shoulders. What do they
Couldn't
do?
lift
They just,
I think I was shooting baskets too much in the gym, and
oh,
I couldn't. My shoulder froze up, and I couldn't lift my arm up, and yeah, like that.
so there you sat.
So there I sat, and it was time to write at some point.
So pulling back and looking at the wild, woolly, big, unruly, and getting more unruly world, how do you see the work you do engaging in that bigger scene? How do you handle all of that? How does it inform you, or do you stay a little closer to home?
Well, that's a big question. Of course, I'd want all of it healed. I want to heal it all, and I feel helpless and hopeless around it. I feel like I can't do a damn thing. But then I feel that each of us can take a step, and I love this idea of ripple effect, of putting something out into the world. And you don't know the consequences of your next kind act or word or sound. I want to think that we can language our way one word at a time, one poem at a time, and as they say, give up attachment to results. And as the big issues, I don't know, What's the sacred language that's going to cut through and open us? Medicine, things that need to be medicine, or accept the way that this crazy life is in all its forms.
Stewart, I sometimes foolishly think I can come up with one thing I could say that would ripple so loud around the world that people would change their sensibilities in the direction of more generosity and less confinement. And I know I can't do that. I don't think that's possible. Nobody's ever succeeded at doing that. But I think that's part of what keeps me moving. I think, I might just say one thing that will cause that to happen. And maybe that's what keeps me moving. I don't know.
Keep moving, one bit at a time.
So when you were growing up, where did you grow up and how was that for you as a boy? What town were you in? What did your family life look like? How did that form you?
Born in Washington, D.C., moved out to L.A. or California when I was 8 years old. I was a shy, introverted kind of a kid. Liked to play football in the streets. There was no certain things. How it affected me was, what did I need to do to be loved? I had to be a good student. And I had to hide all the parts of me that weren't acceptable in that household under the rug, which meant anger, and try to put on a smiley face or a brooding face. I didn't feel greatly emotionally supported, but I felt physically supported. I had a home, I had food on the table, I had support to be a good student, go out and play, that kind of stuff. The maturation process came I think I went to college, but I don't think I was ready for college until I was in my 30s or even later. And the best teachings I ever had weren't from traditional school.
Yeah, I was an adult returning student. I went back to college after having flunked out of a little college at the time called Brevard Junior College. Is now a 4-year school. I went there when I was 18 through 20, and I had no idea how to study. I had no idea what it meant to write an essay. I came up in Western North Carolina in the 50s when education was trying to find its footing, would be a generous way to say it. And I really did 2 years at the junior college, and then that was that. And until I was 32, I drifted around and did whatever one does in the 20s. I went back to school when I was 31, 32, and enrolled at UNCA in Asheville and really did well. I enjoyed every minute of it. And I took theater and French and got a degree in international relations and got to know some really terrific people. This was 81 through 85. So this was pre-digital space, except I remember toward the end in 1985, we had computers or word processing machines that were like on the verge of computering. And I remember being so stunned at how fast they could type and how fantastic it was. But during that time, that's when I started to memorize poetry. And when I graduated, I had an opportunity to have a theater company or to go to law school. And I wanted to do both. And I went in the direction of the theater company, not because I wanted to do art, but because it promised the open road. It promised the traveling, and off I went. But education is a funny thing because most people, I have my education, I graduated, now I'm done with it. But I've always been drawn to knowing things and just keep filling it up, and keep knowing more and more. And that's why I do interviews like this with you, because I want to know stuff. I want to know the details of your life, who you loved, why you stayed where you stayed, why you did what you did, what it was like to be a public defender. Did you defend anybody that made you feel good, or did you struggle through it, when did the poetry emerge from all of that? You can answer any of those questions you like. I'm just throwing them out
Yes,
because I
yes.
am curious.
Yes, the best parts were when I was being a voice for the voiceless, and there were a lot of times initially when I first started to do it, it was a lot of ego, wanting to play a game or in battle for see what I could do in front of juries and stuff like that, and then it became more soulful. Of course, there were people that I liked better than other people, but I always was interested. I always, most of the time, no matter what the crime was or the person before me, in the lockup, I would see a person. I would see the person. That was a good teaching for me, just to see people, and also to deal with my own fears around being around difficult energies, either people labeled crazy or violent or whatever. So yes, there were some good fights, there were some righteous fights, but a lot of it, especially in the last part, which was doing in the mental health court, was a there but for the grace of God go I. Just being labeled, locked up, put away, and who is this power structure doing that? So I always had a problem with authority figures and dealing with police, and it demystified it for me. The gift of that practice was it demystified that judges were good, honest, knowledgeable people. And I saw the humanity in that. And then the last people I had given my power away to were the psychiatrists, who I theoretically knew more about the workings of the mind and beingness than other people, but I saw that that wasn't accurate and that they only knew so much. And a lot of it was reductionist. They try to put in language, reduce a person to a label that often didn't fit. So I loved exploring that. I love confronting power.
So who were some of the people you encountered during that time that impressed you? Clearly the judges fell a bit short. The psychiatrists didn't live up to the ideals, but who was impressive?
Well, I want to say that I just did a blanket indictment of people. So some judges were impressive. There were some grounded, heartful, wise people. Likewise for doctors, some grounded, wise, heartful people. So I was impressed by that. I was impressed by what rang true inside me. Who is this person? But just the label of the person didn't impress me. It was what rang true. And otherwise, I watched some lawyers argue. That impressed me, their ways of speaking. And I found that the best way of communicating was in each case, I would have to find a truth in it myself, something I believed in. If I was talking bull, it would get out there in the world really easily. People know that. People can sense that. So yes, to trusting what I could stand ground on and speak truth from.
Was there ever a time when you couldn't find something to trust in a case?
Sure. Yeah. There was, but I wouldn't yeah, there was. And then you go back to arguing reasonable doubt or case, or just sometimes it was good enough just to be a voice between the person and the power structure seeking to clamp down on it. But sometimes it was hopeless. Sometimes there was nothing to say. It was just pretty dead bang.
So I am now very curious, tying your poetic devotion to all of those experiences that you have collected throughout your life. Do you think that what you learned in the courtroom and in the cells and with the judges and the psychiatrists, the doctors, and all the other people, that sense of how to find trust, has that honed your ability as a poet to find the trust you need to find in whatever you're working with. It almost to me seems like the poem would be the case. I'm going to present my idea to the world. In a
Yeah,
sense, you're arguing your idea to those who read it.
in
Does
a
that make
sense,
sense?
yeah, it does. Yeah, in a sense, it is. It's an argument or an exploration, sometimes fluffed up, sometimes pompous, and sometimes when aligned with some river that sings, good enough just to be that. But I don't know if the work itself brought out the poet. I think it was like any kind of work. You see what you see, you name what you name, you feel what you feel, you hide what you hide. Where's the camaraderie? Where's the closing? And where's the doors that open?
I know that you have some more poetry on your desk right now. Would there be a possibility? I believe you've already said yes to read a couple of more poems for us. I'd love to
Sure,
hear it.
sure. Um, okay, I'll read this poem called Worry, an exploration of worry. I worry about syntax, grammar, tired words. I worry ink has a language I don't understand. I worry I did Martin Gelfand wrong by making a pass at his wife. I worry that the moon will languish sad forever, sipping Coronas and rooting for Judge Judy to give another scroungy ex-boyfriend a tongue lashing. I worry about sugar, rednecks, war, collateral damage, the bumpy slide toward death. I got a job where I was paid to worry. I worried about deadlines, county time, hard time, blood spatter patterns, the psychiatrically correct amount of time to think about God. I worry that my body's decaying, that I've made some pact with laziness and trance, and the price is my soul. I worry that I worry too much, that the roads are jammed, that I'll die without any real connection, that my cock ignores my commands due to some unspeakable fossilized karmic deed. I worry that my gifts are mediocre, that my stream to the great sea often trickles, that a jailbreak is long overdue, and that I should start juicing greens, learn Tai Chi, dump my prescriptions, walk down the sidewalk like some carefree angel, come at last to make things right. So that's my worry, Paul.
And you know, everybody worries. We all have that. What else do you have for us?
Okay, I'll read this one. Called The Pretty Receptionist at Dr. Kaplan's Office. The pretty receptionist at Dr. Kaplan's office keeps her head down the whole time I'm there, and I pretend I'm not interested. I imagine that I love her as a being, not an object of desire. I wish her well, I bless her path, and I maintain it for about 10 seconds, and still she doesn't look at me. She keeps her lipstick mouth down, shuffles paper, indifferent to my beauty. Of course, it would never work between us. I'd realize that love like this is not enough, and I'd worry about purpose with a big P. Sex would be a problem, and we'd battle, and she'd want more from me. She'd want me to work and be happy and smile at the camera. She'd want me to take her out past 9, eat with bigwigs, and make clever talk. I can't breathe thinking of it, like a city dweller caught in no man's land, searchlights crisscrossing the scorched earth, booby traps and landmines every couple of feet.
So you're taking a situation in an office, turning it into a whole story about yourself. and you're thinking, when you create a poem and you finally get it to the point you feel comfortable reading it, like you have these, what does your body feel like? How do you feel when you finish it? And then when you are reading it, how do you feel when you are reading it and when you finish it?
I feel okay when I'm reading it. It's good to just dive in. I've learned over time just to show up. Like, what if this is the last sound that ever goes out into the world? Just show up for it and read it. Afterwards, when I'm done reading it, energetically, I'll shrink down a little bit inside. Who am I? What is it? What was it? What was it like to do that? Was it a good quote performance or showing up? But I'm always glad I did it. Always glad that I showed up for it and just spoke whatever it was.
And maybe just one more. I love what you do. I wanted to get you on this call because every time on this Saturday morning you read, I always enjoy every minute of it. I thought, gee, if I could get Stewart on this and warm him up a bit, he'll read some poetry. So,
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. And I love you, brother. It's good to see you. Good to be with
yeah, it's
you.
good to be with you too.
This is a poem I wrote called Places I Go to on a Break In. And it's about my car being broken into. 1. They break into my car. How could you do it? Why me? I've listened to trees and wind. I picked up 3 pieces of trash a day for weeks. I drove home a disabled man whose dog refused to walk on the hot valley streets. 2. They break into my car. I study karate, aikido, the ways of the knife, the silence of ninja and zen. I become a swordsman, a marksman, a billionaire, a clairvoyant senser, and a knower of the dark. I hunt 'em down. Some I ruin, some I skewer, some I humble and terminate just with the power of my diamond hands. 3. They break into my car. Mea culpa, karma has arrived. I deserve it and more. I've ignored my body and my friends. I've stolen rhyme schemes. I turned a cold hose on a Springer Spaniel in winter. I fudged deductions. I've been stingy with my charity and tips, and I took out a shirt for myself from the bundle I donated to the St. Joseph Center. I loved too much or never enough. I knew that desperation was not an aphrodisiac, but I kept going there anyway, touched myself in motels and empty rooms, and I thought ill of my parents. 4. They break into my car. The poor, sweet, hungry hearts, room for everything in soft belly. May the things of my car bless them, trickle into their bones and souls and nourish them. May their attacks on me, seen as a request for love, be as filling as Sunday brunch by the sea. 5. They break into my car. I want to sleep for days, months, years. I long to return to the womb, rolling deep, cradle, balm beyond words. There's only the pole to go down. 6. They break into my car. I eat 3 chocolate chip cookies, and I think of Sable, her blonde hair, black sweater, all heavy-breasted and nippled. You couldn't stay away, could you? She says.
I love the break into my car and then you go in all these different directions. I've lost a few things by people breaking into something, and it does feel empty when it happens. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has experienced that. So, Stewart, as we get close to the time to close, I'd love for you to reflect just a little bit on how you would encourage other people to engage the way you engage. You have some thoughts on what people can do to speak their truth, if you will. I'd like to hear some of that wisdom.
Listen to people you like, read things you like, trust yourself, play with all the parts of yourself, the orchestra inside you. Speak in a normal speaking voice. Speak in archetypes. Dress up as an archetype and bend over in a wise and gnarled place and speak from the energy. Find teachers that excite you. Go for the juice. Believe in yourself. Find people that believe in you. Pray. Pray to the muse. Fall on your knees and apologize to everybody that needs to be apologized to. Do ceremony. Do ritual. Light candles. Light candles. Go out and plant a seed in the garden. Take all your rejection slips that you've ever had from any place and put a fire to them and plant them with seeds in the garden to blossom some flower. Do ritual. Find people that speak to your heart and find things that bring you alive that you really want to say. And watch out for the addiction to being perfect and being a good student. We've done enough of that.
Well, Stewart, thank you so much for being on Twice 5 Miles Radio. I really do appreciate it.
Good to be with you, brother. I love you. Good to see you.
Back to you. Back to you. And there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with Stewart Mintzner. I love the way Stewart's voice rides so easy in the ear, and I hope you feel the same way. I enjoyed everything Stewart had to say. I most especially liked that last piece of advice. Find things you really want to say and watch out for that addiction of being perfect. I've never really thought of perfectionism as an addiction, but I suppose it could be. We certainly can become habituated to getting it right and using that as an excuse to not do anything at all. At least I've done that in the past. I've kind of given that up now. I'm not as worried about what's right and what's going to be exactly the way I want it to be. I try to just let things play out and then work with whatever plays out. I've been doing this show for almost 8 years now, and when I first started to do it, I really did try to get it right, but I didn't even know what I was trying to get right. I was trying to do something that I thought would work, and it did work, and over the years it's evolved, and now I'm a lot more comfortable with whatever I put out. That said, I do edit these shows quite tight so that I make sure that it sounds good for you. Speaking of perfectionism, I've been editing these shows on the fly, on the road, in many, many different places. And right now, I'm on the road. Actually, I'm not on the road. I'm sitting in an airport. I'm in Tokyo, and I'm getting ready to board a flight to LA, and then from LA I'm going to go to Albuquerque, and then from Albuquerque I'm headed to Asheville. I just learned that there's a big fire near Amarillo, so I was planning on driving through I-40 Amarillo, but now I have to reevaluate that, talk about perfectionism. But here in this airport in Japan, I'm sitting in what's ordinary, really. People are just settling in, trying to get wherever they need to go. And if you've ever flown, and I imagine you have, you know what it feels like. I have noticed that airports do have a different vibe. They reflect the country that they're built in. For example, this morning when I left Manila, we drove very early to the airport. I was nervous as a cat because I was afraid that I would miss my airplane, even though I was 2 hours ahead. And I had been to the Manila airport before, and in the past, the lines are long, and it's arduous and awful, and I just didn't like it at all. And so I was very nervous. This morning I got there, I discovered that they had redone the airport. I walked through the door, I was greeted by the Philippine Airlines personnel, and in the Philippines, there's something very interesting. They honor anybody who is over 60 years old. Now, I'm over 60, so I qualify as a senior. When I first arrived at 60, I resisted it a bit. But now that I've gotten used to it, I rather like the privilege of being a senior. And being a senior when you're flying with Philippine Air means you don't have to wait in line. They make sure that they escort you right up to the counter and you get your ticket. And then when I went through immigrations this morning, they said, oh, the senior line's over there. 2 people, I was through. It took 20 minutes from the time I arrived at the Manila airport until I emerged on the other side of the check-in, and that included running all my gear through the scanners. So the culture in the Philippines honors the seniors, and one of the ways that you get benefit from that is ease in boarding an airplane and other benefits like discounts in restaurants. And the young kids, the little ones, will stand up when you come in the room and they honor you. They'll even give you a handshake. Often, if they know you, they'll give you a kiss on the cheeks. I used to resist that. I used to resist it when people would say Sir Jim or Sir James or Mr. Now I say thank you, and I just return it by saying thank you, sir. And it seems to work pretty well. So this morning I managed to get on my flight and made it to Tokyo. And here I've enjoyed about a 3.5-hour stay. And the airport is super, super modern. Everything is in order. Everything is in place. It's quite spacious, a lot of ease in the design, a lot of circular type areas, as well as curvature in the windows. I'm looking at a bay of windows that have large pipes on them, if you will, and the windows are let a lot of light in, and the pipes soak around, so it makes you feel like you're in a slow, easy swirl. And the people around are just people, just like they have always been in airports. A woman to my left has gray socks on, and she's plugging in her computer. A young fellow looks like he's about 25, has a white sweatshirt on, and he's focused on, of course, his computer as well. A lot of people are. I'm on mine as well. You have this guy coming to me now. He has a beard, a black hat, a long-sleeve T-shirt, a couple of carry-on bags, black shorts, and black shoes. He seems quite content in the way he dresses. Some people are extremely fashionable here, and other people are just, well, jeans and T-shirts. Bearded fellow, sweatshirt, hoodie, looks like he's about 63, gray hair, peering at the schedule. So it's really nice just to be able to give you this report. People are coming down the escalators. I'm at gate number 143, and you can hear behind me the announcement in Japanese. I'm looking out on the 881. They're getting ready to board right now. So I'm going to have to close this down pretty soon, but I did want to tell you, I'm looking at the gray skies. It's cloudy here. It's cool, unlike it was in Manila this morning. It's very hot in Manila. And so I'm here, getting ready to board the flight. This will be a 10, 11-hour flight. I'll land in LA tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. I'm very confused. Today is Thursday. When you hear this, it'll be Friday or Saturday or whenever you hear it. It's still Wednesday in the States. So I'll be there tomorrow, which will be Friday here, but tomorrow now, and you can see how confusing it is. And it's quite fun to try to get all that befuddled. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you so much for tuning in to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVMLP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com. For more on Walter's music, if you'd like to reach out to me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. Thank you, Davine Dial, for managing WPVM-FM on Wall Street in downtown Asheville, and Robin Collier for managing KCEI, which is in downtown Taos. And I'd like to remind you that we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing, imaginativestorm.com is a great place to look. Lots of stuff there, and if you like to write, maybe you'll find it to be quite helpful. Imaginativestorm.com. And the next minute will be a little bit like a bonus at the end of the movie after you've watched all the trailers. I'm now in LA. The flight was 9 hours and 33 minutes. I slept about 4 hours on the flight. It's 12:11 p.m. in LA, which is Pacific time. My flight leaves for Albuquerque at 2:20 this afternoon. I'll be in Albuquerque by 5:30 p.m. The fire is still raging in Texas. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with that, but somehow I'll manage to make it to Asheville, and maybe I'll see you there or somewhere else. So for now, I'm sitting in a mezzanine in the LAX airport. I'm looking down on hundreds and hundreds of people, but nobody comes up here. I don't know what that's about. Hard to say why people travel in the ways they travel. They land the way they land. But I'm up here in the very quiet space on a nice carpet with my legs stretched out, finishing this recording for you, which I will submit online to WPVM-FM and also to KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio. So on that note, again, thank you for tuning in to Twice 5 Miles Radio and listening to my little travelogue at the end of the show. I really do appreciate it. And hey, I am out there roaming around, so maybe I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.